What if the reason you keep burning out has nothing to do with how much you're doing and everything to do with why you're doing it? Because there's a 5,000-year-old answer to this, and modern psychology just caught up to it. Most burnout advice tells you to do less, rest more, set boundaries, and sure, that helps for about 2 weeks. Then you're right back in the same cycle. What we're going to talk about today goes deeper than that. It's a mental operating system that elite athletes, top performers, and ancient warriors all figured out independently. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. By the end of this video, you'll have a completely different relationship with effort, results, and what it actually means to work hard. Here's a question worth sitting with. When was the last time you did something purely for the doing of it, with zero attachment to how it turned out? Most of us can't remember, because from the moment we learn that performance equals reward, gold stars in school, grades, promotions, likes, revenue, we wired our effort to our outcomes. We stopped working, we started bargaining. Every task becomes a transaction. I'll give you this effort and you give me that result. And when the result doesn't show up, or shows up late, or shows up smaller than expected, the brain reads it as a threat. Cortisol spikes, motivation crashes. You feel like you're failing even when you're working harder than ever. This is what psychologists call outcome dependency. Dr. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's self-determination theory, one of the most replicated frameworks in motivation research, shows that when external rewards become the primary driver of behavior, intrinsic motivation collapses. You start needing bigger and bigger results just to feel okay about your effort. Sound familiar? That's the burnout cycle. Not too much work, too much emotional hostage taking by results you can't fully control. The ancient diagnosis of this problem is almost identical, and it came from a battlefield conversation between a warrior and his teacher thousands of years ago. The warrior was paralyzed, not from laziness, from the weight of outcomes he couldn't guarantee, and the teaching he received changed how millions of people think about work, effort, and what it means to show up fully. The teaching is called Nishkama Karmu, which, stripped of all religious packaging, means this: do the work fully. Release the grip on the outcome. Not half-hearted work, not indifference, not "it doesn't matter, so why try?" The exact opposite. The idea is that you bring your absolute best to the process every single time, and then you stop treating the result as the thing your worth depends on. Here's the key distinction most people miss. This is not passive. This is not detachment in the sense of not caring. It's detachment in the sense of not being emotionally held hostage by something you can't fully control. Think about what you actually control when you work on something. You control your preparation, your attention, your decision making, your response to setbacks. You do not control market timing, other people's decisions, algorithms, luck, or the thousand invisible variables that determine whether a specific outcome lands the way you hoped. When you tie your emotional state to things you don't control, you've essentially handed your nervous system over to randomness. No wonder it breaks down. The process over outcome operating system says the work itself is the purpose. The result is information, not a verdict on your value. This isn't mysticism. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades studying exactly this. Her research on growth mindset shows that people who define success by the quality of their effort rather than specific outcomes show dramatically higher resilience, creativity, and long-term performance. They don't burn out at the same rate. They don't quit as fast. They improve faster. The ancient teaching and the modern research are pointing at the same thing. The relationship between you and your work matters more than any single result. Let's make this concrete, because release attachment to outcomes sounds great until you have a mortgage payment due and a launch that flopped. Kobe Bryant talked about this in a way that stuck with me. He described his practice routine as something he did regardless of how the previous game went. Win by 30, lose by 20. The next morning's work was the same. He wasn't indifferent to winning. He wanted to win more than almost anyone. But he had decoupled his identity and his daily effort from the scoreboard. The scoreboard was information. The work was non-negotiable. That's not detachment. That's a specific kind of discipline. The discipline of showing up to the process even when the results aren't cooperating. Or think about any writer who has ever published something they believed in, watched it get ignored, and then kept writing anyway. Not because they stopped caring about readers, because they understood that the quality of the next piece of work couldn't be held hostage by the reception of the last one. Entrepreneurs who survive long enough to build something real almost always describe a version of this shift. At some point, they stopped working to prove something and started working because the problem itself was worth solving. That shift from outcome driven to process driven is often the exact moment their performance actually improves. Here's the psychological mechanism. When you're outcome dependent, every setback is a threat signal. Your brain goes into threat response mode. And threat response mode is the opposite of creative, high performance thinking. You get tunnel vision, you get rigid, you make worse decisions. When you're process anchored, setbacks become data. Same event, completely different neurological response. Your prefrontal cortex stays online, you adapt, you keep moving. This is how to avoid burnout at its root, not by doing less, but by changing what the work means to you. Knowing this intellectually is easy, living it is harder. There are 3 specific traps that pull even the most self aware people back into the burnout cycle. Trap 1. The comparison loop. The moment you start measuring your results against someone else's, you've left the process entirely. You're no longer working, you're competing with a snapshot of someone else's highlight reel. The ancient teaching is explicit about this. Your duty is your own path, not someone else's. Comparison is the fast track back to outcome dependency because it makes your results feel like they mean something about your rank in the world. Trap 2. The validation cycle. This one is brutal in the social media era. When external feedback becomes the measure of whether your work was worth doing, you've outsourced your operating system to an algorithm. Likes, comments, shares, these are results you don't control. Building your sense of effort quality around them is like building a house on sand that shifts with the tide. Trap 3. The arrival fallacy. This is the belief that once you hit a specific outcome, the number, the title, the recognition, you'll finally feel okay. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. The brain adjusts, the new baseline becomes normal, and you're back to chasing the next outcome. People who live in this loop never actually arrive anywhere, they just keep moving the finish line. The antidote to all 3 traps is the same: return to the process. What is the actual work in front of you right now? What would excellent effort look like in this specific moment? That question breaks the comparison loop, the validation cycle, and the arrival fallacy simultaneously, because it brings you back to the only place where real work actually happens. This is the core of how to avoid burnout long term. Not a one-time reset, a daily practice of returning to the work itself as the thing that matters. So how do you actually build this into the way you work? Not as a concept, but as a daily operating system? First, define your process metrics before you start any significant project. Most people only track outcome metrics: revenue, followers, weight, sales. Process metrics are different. How many quality hours did I put in? Did I bring my full attention? Did I make decisions based on what was right, not what was safe? When you track these, you always have something to win at, regardless of whether the outcome cooperates. Second, build a debrief practice that separates effort quality from result quality. After any significant piece of work, ask 2 questions. 1. Did I bring my best effort to the process? 2. What does the result tell me about what to adjust? These are separate questions. Conflating them is how people spiral into self-blame when outcomes don't land or stop learning when they do. Third, practice what I'd call the daily reset. At the start of each day, before you check results, metrics, or notifications, ask, what is the most important work I can do today? And what does excellent effort on that work look like? You're anchoring the day to the process before the outcome noise starts. This isn't about ignoring results. Results matter, feedback matters, adjusting your approach based on what's working matters. But there's a difference between using results as information and using them as the measure of your worth. The people who sustain high performance over years, not months, not one viral moment, but actual long careers of meaningful work, almost always describe some version of this. They love the work, they're serious about results, but the work doesn't need the result to justify its existence. That's the shift, that's the ancient secret, and it's available to anyone willing to practice it, not as a philosophy, but as a daily choice about where you put your attention. You don't avoid burnout by doing less. You avoid it by changing your relationship with effort itself so that the work becomes something you do because it's worth doing, not because of what you needed to give you back. If any part of this landed for you, if you recognized yourself in the outcome dependency cycle, or if the process first idea opened something up, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, where in your life are you most caught in the results trap right now? And if you have any questions about what we covered today, drop them in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, subscribe. We put out new videos every week that take ancient frameworks like this and make them immediately practical for the way modern people actually live and work. And one more thing, I put together a free daily mind reset kit. It's a short daily practice built around exactly what we talked about today, including the process metrics template and the debrief questions. The link is in the description. It takes about 5 minutes a day, and it's the fastest way to start living this, not just understanding it. Do the work, release the grip. See you next week.